black people are not the original inhabitants of South Africa, which, in fact, they're realizing that now. When they claimed that they owned all the land, the original inhabitants, of whom there are not many left, said, excuse me, we were the original inhabitants. You guys were migrants here as well, which they were.
You arrived here as settlers in 1652. It's a historical fact.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Trending Pulse Worldwide. If you're new, kindly consider subscribing. Now, I don't know about you, but this is the first time I'm hearing that black people are not, in fact, the original inhabitants of South Africa. I mean, really? Have you guys heard of this before? Let me know. Because according to this man, black South Africans actually migrated from Cameroon while the white settlers moved inland from the east. And get this, he even claims that the Khoisan people, the supposed true natives, aren't even black. So, let's hear more of what he had to say before we can break it down.
Okay, the original inhabitants of southern Africa are called the Khoisan. In the west, the Bushmen are Khoisan. Hottentots are Khoisan. But you can't use those words anymore. You now have to call them Khoisan. Okay? All right. Now, and they were the inhabitants of the whole of southern Africa. So the whole of South Africa at one stage were Khoisan. The black people originated in what is now Cameroon. That's where they...
Hold on, Khoisan aren't black?
No.
What are they?
They're a completely separate ethnicity all on their own. In fact, if you look at them, they're kind of yellowy. They're a light brown yellow color.
Right.
But they look more Asian than African. They do not consider themselves African.
Interesting.
When the white guys arrive in Cape Town, so 1652 is when Dutch guys arrived there. At that stage, you could have divided South Africa almost exactly 50-50, what's now South Africa. The western half of the country was entirely Khoisan. There were no black people there. None at all. Only Khoisan. So we're Cape Towners, all that area, Khoisan people. The northern part of the country did have black people. They'd started arriving, and they were still migrating.
How long have they been there in the northern?
Well, it's a moot point, and people have debated it. It would seem that black people had probably started arriving in the northern parts of South Africa maybe 1,000 years, something like that, about 1,000 years before whites got there, right up in the north, okay? Mm-hmm. And they've been slowly moving south because it's an empty space. I mean, one of the things about Africa is it's very empty. Up until the 1950s, Africa was very empty. It's the population exploded because white colonists, the naughty white colonists, put hospitals there, and there's been this huge population explosion since the 1950s. But Africa was really very empty up until then. And so tribes moved around and just occupied new empty territory. So the guys coming down from the north, who called the Bantus, it's called the Bantu expansions when black people came out of the Cameroons, they'd been occupying South Africa and moving systematically south, down the east coast of South Africa.
They were pastoralists, am I right?
Yeah, they were pastoralists, yeah. Whereas the Khoisan were hunter-gatherers. They were like aboriginals, okay, so they hadn't become pastoralists yet. The black guys are migrating down from the north and settling, doing exactly what white guys are doing. So white guys, the Dutch guys from Cape Town, were settling by moving eastwards. So the white guys are moving from Cape Town eastwards, and the black guys are moving down from the north, and they met at a place called the Fish River, which is now in the middle of South Africa at a place called, it's still called Border. Everybody in South Africa calls that part of the country the border, even though there's no border there at all anymore. But there was a river called the Fish River, which is where blacks and whites first encountered each other. And then it started 100 years of warfare between whites and the Xhosa, who were the tribe that they met there. So, okay, so at that point, that would have been in about 1700. So whites and blacks first encountered each other in 1700. Okay? So whites had already been there for 100 years at that point.
So let me break it down a little bit before we continue. The claim that black South Africans arrived later is something we've heard before. And yes, historians do acknowledge that the Bantu migration happened thousands of years ago. But does that mean that black South Africans are just visitors in their own land? Well, not everyone agrees, especially not Julius Malema. Take a look at what he had to say.
You arrived here as settlers in 1652. It's a historical fact. And you were using South Africa as a refreshment station. You were not here to settle. You were passing. Because of our Africanness and the spirit of Ubuntu, we have embraced you and we have shared our land with you. And we have accepted that you have naturalized in this country. But it doesn't change the fact that you came here as a visitor. We came from one country called Africa. This South Africa you are talking about was imposed on us. So we didn't come from anywhere. Speak for yourself.
Well, Malema isn't holding back. He flips the argument completely, telling white South Africans you are in fact not the originals of this place. You are just passing through, moving like pastoralists. But we accepted you because we had the spirit of Ubuntu in us. And again, he says, you should know that we accepted you and you are not originally from here. But now you have been naturalized and you are citizens of South Africa. And if you think he stopped there, he didn't. He goes on to say, even though you think that we migrated, that is your own belief. But we know that we are the originators of Africa. Now, here's what I think. As Black people, we need to start reclaiming and telling our own history because for too long, the versions we were taught were written from a colonial perspective. And these narratives often frame us as migrants and as people who just moved around rather than as the rightful inhabitants of the land we call home. And let's be honest, if it wasn't for the internet and independent media, many of us would still believe those narratives without question. But now at least we have access to more perspectives, historical research, and discussions that challenge what we were taught. And here is the real issue. If we don't start documenting and teaching our own history to our children, they will grow up learning the same incomplete stories, and they will inherit a version of history that doesn't fully represent them. And again, if we don't take charge of our own narratives, future generations will continue to rely on external sources to define who we are. So I have to ask, how much of what we've been taught is even true? And more importantly, what are we going to do about it? And finally, the more we learn is the more we realize how much history has been shaped by different perspectives. That's why it's so important for us to question, research, and have this conversation, not just online, but in our communities and schools. Because history isn't just about the past, it influences how we see ourselves today and how future generations will understand their identity as well. So, at the end of the day, knowledge is power, and the more we seek the truth, the more we ensure that all sides of history are acknowledged and understood. So what do you think? Have you ever had this perspective before, or is this new to you? Let me know in the comments. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more trending stories. And also, don't forget to turn on your notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next one. Bye.